All right, today we're talking about the math of men. And to start, we're just going to draw two lines. We're going to draw one, and we're going to draw two. A little longer. Okay? And we're going to label these lines eligibility. And we're going to label this one ego. Now, what is eligibility? Let's talk about that first. Eligibility. Okay. What describes what makes you eligible, right? First thing, kind of controversial, is going to be looks. Now, the reason looks are important for your eligibility is looks are what determines your first impressions for everybody, literally everybody. So it doesn't matter who you meet, how someone looks is going to determine the way they think about you. And that's human nature, regardless of what anyone thinks or what anyone tries to do. Your looks play a super important role in someone's first impressions about you. Number two, we're going to do financial success. Now, financial success does not mean wealthy. Keep in mind, the American dream, like 40, 50 years ago, was backyard, garage, car, and a refrigerator. And if you had those things, you were living the dream, baby. Like that was success right there. And I think we kind of lost sight of that in recent years. But it doesn't take a whole lot to be financially successful. Number three, let's say good choices. And I'm going to add values to that. And so all this is, are you making good choices? Not just good like financial decisions, but also good choices in general that are making you a better person, that are improving yourself. Do you have good values, that you're holding yourself to a standard and trying to be a better person, right? And people see that, and that improves your eligibility. Let's talk about ego. Now, ego kind of gets a bad rap because as soon as you say ego, you think like, oh, someone with a, big inflated ego, right? But that's only when it's too much ego, or they have an ego and you say they have an ego to say they have too big of an ego. But all ego is presentability. Okay? So all this means is this is the way you want others to perceive you, or that you perceive yourself, right? This is how you present yourself to the world, right? So people with too big of an ego are presenting too much to the world, right? And maybe they don't have the eligibility to back it up, right? So it's also how you present it to yourself. So, do you think well about yourself? Do you make good choices to think well about yourself and things like that? It's like your personality, right? How do you hold yourself, and how do you show how eligible you are, right? That's all this is. Let's talk about how to improve both of these things, okay? So, for example, how do I improve how eligible I am? Well, we start with looks, right? And you might say, well, it's genetics. I can't change how I look. That's that. I look like I got hit by a car. Nothing's going to change that, right? Sure, that might be the case. But what can you do? What can you control to change that? Maybe you start hitting the gym. Maybe you start eating a little healthier. Maybe, you start doing your hair and getting a haircut and keeping yourself well kempt. Maybe you even just like clean your room and make the space around you, more presentable and more look better and things like that, right? For girls, it's pretty easy. You just put on makeup and it turns out you look pretty. Witchcraft. Anyways, financial success. This is more importantly financial decisions. So the better financial decisions you make, the more well off you're going to be financially. That's painfully obvious, I know, but you think about that, like let's say you're balling out on a Camaro that you obviously can't afford. That's not a very good financial decision. That's not going to set you up for financial success, right? So to improve financial success, it's, I don't know, maybe you get an education. Maybe you don't make poor investments or investments that you make, just on a whim and go buy things on a whim. Maybe you stop spending money on things you don't need. Maybe, these are important financial decisions that will set you up for success later. Good choices and values. This is a more personal adjustment to improve your eligibility. And I'm going to add here, to improve eligibility takes work, right? It takes work to improve your looks, unless you're a girl. It takes it takes work to start making better financial decisions and maybe go to school or learn a trade or improve what you can offer the world in order to be financially successful. And it takes work to make better choices. Maybe you're breaking a bad habit. Maybe you're trying to stop drinking or trying to stop smoking or you're trying to improve yourself and make better choices for yourself. And that takes work. And so to improve your eligibility, it takes work. Let's talk about improving your ego. How do you raise your ego, right? Now you might say everybody has a problem with having too high of an ego. And I'd also say there's a lot of people that have the opposite, where they need a higher ego and they need to feel better about themselves. And we'll get to that of why that is. But this would be improving how sociable you are. And so I'll say this is sociable. Let's leave it at that. Sociableness, sociable. Improving how sociable you are. So maybe you start saying yes to more invites. Maybe you start going out more. Maybe you start, trying to put yourself out there and talk to people and learn to talk to people and learn to be more sociable, because it is an art. I kind of want to say it's something learned. It's not something that you're just born with of how to be sociable. It's something learned over time as you interact with more people, and it's a skill that you get better at. So that's how to improve your ego. Let's get to the meat of the matter. So we're going to draw a third line here. Let me just line this up a little better here. I'm going to draw this third line. That was a horrible lineup, but whatever. We're going to call this the confidence line. Okay? All the confidence line is where eligibility and ego meet perfectly. There's perfect equilibrium between the two, where you have the ego and you have the eligibility to back up that ego. So let's talk about the outliers. Before we talk about this confidence line a little more, let's talk about the outliers first of what does not on the confidence line look like. So not on the confidence line, we're going to call these people at the top, I spelled that so wrong, the arrogance. And we're going to call the people down here the victims. And so the people up here, these arrogants, they have too high of an ego and do not have the eligibility to back up that ego. And what this often leads to is a lot of insecurity, because everyone knows where they are on this eligibility scale. Everyone knows, right? Meaning like you know yourself where you are on the eligibility scale. And so when your ego is too high and you're talking, too big or too much, it's going to lead to insecurity, because deep down you aren't meeting that eligibility to be talking up here, right? Maybe your eligibility is over here, maybe you're right here, and you're saying you're way up here, and you are not, right? You're presenting yourself to be all the way up here when that is not the case, and you're talking way too much, right? The victims down here, this is the opposite problem. And that's why I say, usually you have the problem with too much ego, and I don't think that's the case. Because there's a lot of people on the flip side who also complain too much. And I would describe that's what these people down here are. And so these people just will not stop complaining and find fault in anything they possibly can, right? And the reason this line exists is because anyone above or below this line isn't fun to be around. They're not someone that you enjoy hanging out with. And so on this confidence line is that perfect line where you enjoy hanging out with someone, right? These people are just an absolute pleasure to be around. These people are able to admit their faults, and they're also good at what they do, right? And they know what they're good at because they have the ego to match it. And so they know what they're good at, and they present how eligible they are in a good way. And they have the ability to do that. They're also willing to admit when they aren't eligible enough, right? So they'll say, yeah, I'm not up here. I know I'm not over here on eligibility. I'm right here, but I'm content. I'm confident staying here where I am. Not staying, obviously, but they're confident where they are, and they aren't, complaining that they're not over here on eligibility, and they're not saying that they're over there on eligibility and presenting themselves that way. That's not how they are confident where they are. And these are the people who I would call husband material, right? These people are who you want to hang around with. So let's kind of talk about like what are some examples of positions on here where you would be. So let's start with someone down here. Let's start with super eligible, not enough ego. So this person right here has they've made all these good decisions, right? They've made themselves very eligible, and they're still complaining, right? And you can't understand. And it's a pain to be around, and it's annoying, and it's not a pleasurable experience for anybody involved, because this person is just a pain to be around. And so they have everything going right for them, and they've made all these good decisions, they've put in the work, and they're still complaining because their ego isn't there. They don't present themselves enough to be up here. They need to be able to present themselves more instead of just complaining where they aren't. On the flip side, let's say someone's up here, right? And this is an interesting dynamic where they're pretty close to that confidence line, right? You would think like, okay, they can probably get away with being a little more confident. They're close enough, or a little more arrogant, excuse me. They can get away with being a little more arrogant because they're close enough to the confidence line. And you would think that would be the case, when in reality it isn't, because what happens is when you're this far up on eligibility and you're up here and you start being too arrogant, it comes off way worse, because you've put in all this work and you have all this financial success, and what happens when you flaunt it is you stir up jealousy. And so anyone below you on the eligibility scale is going to see you up here and flaunting how eligible you are, and is going to complain and get jealous. And they might turn around and say, oh, well, these people are just, they're below me because they're below me on the eligibility scale, and they're losers, right? The problem is that's not presentable. That's not someone you want to hang out with, is someone who just says everyone else is losers, look at me. That's not someone who's fun to be around. So someone who's perfectly on the line right here, let's say, this person is vastly different from these two, because this person has done all the work, has put in the effort to do all these things, and presents themselves in that way. And so this person up here has the nice car because they want to brag about the nice car. This person down here has the nice car but complains because they want an even better car, right? This person right here has the nice car because they like the nice car. Not for anyone else, not for bragging about it. And they don't have a nice car and complain that they want a new car. They love that car, and it's a nice car. And they know that it presents themselves in a really good way when they drive around the nice car, and they feel good, right? And they don't feel too good, but they're confident about it. And that's the difference. So let's talk about someone over here, right? Let's say you're pretty low on the eligibility scale. So let's start with someone right here again. Let's say you're down here. Not a lot of eligibility, not a lot of ego. What's going on? This person is complaining a whole awful lot. They also have a whole awful lot going wrong in their life. Now, this could be because of a few things. However, majority of the time, this is self-inflicted because it takes work to move up on the eligibility scale, right? So this person's complaining a whole awful lot, and it seems like, yeah, they have a lot to complain about because, you know, they're down here in eligibility. They have the right to complain. When in reality, they don't, because if they just put in some work, right, put in a little effort, they could move up on the eligibility. These things aren't difficult, right? It's not difficult to start hitting the gym and get a haircut. It's not difficult to stop, you know, buying dumb things and stop making poor financial decisions. It's not difficult to say, okay, it is difficult to stop drinking and addictions. Obviously, it is difficult to stop doing drugs, for example, right? But you did get into drugs. That's your fault, right? And so someone who's here, let's say, right? Someone on the confidence line is going to say, yeah, I messed up. And they're willing to admit that fault. And they're willing to accept help. And they're willing to say, yes, I want to be over here. I want to improve my eligibility. However, on the flip side of this person right here on the confidence line, what they're also going to be able to do is feel content where they are and be happy with where they are right now instead of complaining about it. And before I continue on this person, let's say someone over here is arrogant. This person is just an idiot because they've got nothing going on, and it's usually when you're down here, it's painfully obvious you got nothing going on, and they think they're up here, and they are not, and it's pretty obvious. This person's just an idiot. But this person right here, and I'm gonna differentiate between these two. This down here is usually humor, and this up here is usually humble. And so as you improve your eligibility and move up on the confidence line, this is what you need to keep in mind, where you have the humor and you're willing to say, you're willing to laugh about where you are and say, yeah, I am. Yeah, I know. And you're also working on it. The person up here is saying, I've made it, and I know I've made it, and I'm not going to brag that I've made it, but I know I've made it. I'm going to present myself in that way that I've made it. And so humble doesn't mean like, okay, you've made it, but you still, need to drive some beat up old Toyota Corolla from 1990 something, right? You can buy the nice car and still be humble because it's part of how you're presenting yourself. Down here, you might be having a rough spot, right? You're having a pretty hard time down here, but you're willing to laugh about it and you have a good attitude about it. And you are working to move up on this eligibility scale, and you will improve, and you will continue to improve. The other thing we can talk about too is these people handle themselves extremely well, and that's why this is the confidence line. They have the confidence to handle themselves in almost any environment, and so this is what is going to be the husband material, okay? And the reason being is that when you're looking for a husband, the biggest thing ever is, are they going to embarrass me, right? And if you're below this line and you're complaining all the time and it's embarrassing to be the partner of anyone down here who's just complaining all the time. It's equally as embarrassing to be with someone who is arrogant and just keeps talking and talking and doesn't stop and just obviously has a way too inflated ego, and it's embarrassing. And so for guys, I think it's important to understand there's that joke of like, oh, the ick, right? And it's true as funny as it is, right? It's less about ick and it's more about embarrassing. And so if you're down here complaining all the time, it's embarrassing. And if you're up here talking way too much about yourself, it's embarrassing. And so keeping this happy medium of the confidence line is where you're going to find husband material. And these people handle themselves well in any environment. And that doesn't mean brushing everything off, right? You don't roll over like a dog for every little thing, right? If you're confident, you're going to have the ego to say, hey, no, right? And you're going to handle things, and you have the confidence to handle things. And so if something happens that needs addressed, this person on this confidence line will address that. At the same time, they'll also brush off, things that might not matter that much. So for example, let's say over here we have this person where everything's going right, and someone pushes their buttons the wrong way. This person's going to freak out. They're going to freak out just as much as this person, where you say something about their eligibility and they lose their mind because they think they're up here. They present themselves as up here, and they don't want to lose that image. And so they lose their minds, and it's embarrassing when they lose their minds. And that goes for anyone in the arrogance category, because they're presenting themselves way too high than they are, and and because they're insecure about it, they need to maintain that image. For down here, it's the opposite problem, where this person is, if you push their buttons, right, it is all your fault. Even let's say you have a valid argument. Let's say you have a issue with someone down here who is a valid concern. Does not matter. This person is going to complain, and it's all your fault, and it's never their fault. And why would you ever do that? And why would you, I'm struggling with this right now. Why would you come to me when I'm struggling? And blah, 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 blah. It doesn't stop, right? So this person is equally as embarrassing as this person in a different way, but equally as embarrassing. The last thing, this is kind of a side note more, but why doesn't the confidence line look like this? Let me do this. Why shouldn't the confidence line look like this, right? Isn't there a point where your ego gets too inflated, right? You have too much ego at a certain point. Shouldn't it just plateau because that's too much ego in general? And my answer would be no. Because the more eligible you get, right, the more you can present yourself in a good way. And I'd say typically people hang out with their crowd of eligible people, right? So typically your crowd is going to be wherever you lie on the eligibility scale, and that's who you're hanging out with. And so this person, to keep up with their crowd, needs to present themselves. They do, because that's their crowd, that's all their friends, that's their social circle. These are the people they're hanging out with. And so they do need to present themselves well, right? But they do it in a humble way. They do it in a way that isn't flaunting, and they don't complain that they need to be where someone else is. They're very confident about where they are. This person doesn't have that problem because they're hanging out with the same group of people. And what usually ends up happening is this person is trying to work up their eligibility, right? This person on the confidence line is trying to work up here. And they have this person dragging them down, and they have this person being an idiot and equally dragging them down. And this guy has to be like, what are you doing? And stop complaining. I'm trying to, get up here. And so these are the people who you want to surround yourself in a circle with more people on the confidence line with you. You don't want to be associating with these people. You don't want to be associating with these people because it is embarrassing and because they're not fun people to be around in general. And these people, you don't want to be associating with these people because these people are just going to drag you way back down this line because they're just complaining all the time, and they get all these stupid ideas in your head of, instead of just rolling with the punches because you're down here and you got to work to get up there, they're going to drag you back down here and just say, let's just complain about where we are, and it's everyone else's fault that we're down here instead of my own. And you're not willing to accept the accountability for it. And don't hang out with this person because they're just dumb. That's all I got. I might make a follow-up video. I don't know. But yeah. That is the math of men.